What up my beautiful people? In today's video we're going to look how to do a quick master in Logic Pro. Everything will be timestamped down below because I feel this will probably be a relatively lengthy video, but hopefully get you the process down into a shorter time. Now a quick bit of preface. First of all, some of you are going to, why would you want to do a quick master? You shouldn't rush the process. Well, that's completely fine. You have that opinion. Jog on to the next video. If you work in electronic music or you go out and play and DJ and perform your own stuff, doing a quick dirty master to test in a club is a super common thing that you'll do. If you've also got friends who are DJs who want to test out a new idea for a track, augmentation of it, you do the quick, dirty, best master you can before that night. It's a super common thing to happen in the electronic music space. Now, in case any of you find this a struggle or you're not used to this overall process, I'll put a couple of tips at the end of the video to really help you out and get a quicker, better idea of how you can work, giving you some more advanced tools to work with. I hope they're helpful for you. Anyone that wants to hear the full track, that'll be right at the end as well. So do make sure you stay to the end of the video if you want those extra advanced tips and you want to hear the entire track. Today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. They let me get my music out to all of the major distributors, and they do that at a price an independent artist can easily afford. If you're ready to get your music or beats out there and want to release an unlimited amount of music each year, check the link in the description below for a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution with DistroKid. The first thing is, look, I've got a whole session open here, and I would recommend, actually, regardless of the fact you could do it like this, you're going to get a better result if you bounce it out first. So let's just go over what we would do for that, and I will explain the reason and mindset for that shortly. So first off, this is just a dirty D&B track that isn't really finished but was a good example for the video. I'm not here to shit on anybody's music. You do your music, it sounds however you want it to be. This is just here for an example purpose. So first off, we just go like this, nice little intro, and then boom, big heavy rolling bass line. And what I've just done there is play the loudest, most aggressive part of the track because I just want to have a look at my stereo out here and make sure we're not going up to 0. Now, there is a limiter on here, but you can see the limiter is doing, well, nothing. It's stopping at minus 0.1 dB, of which we're not touching. It's there for, you know, streaming and not blow my ears out purposes. So we're not clipping that master channel. We can bounce this out. We're going to have a nice track with about half a decibel headroom, which, believe it or not, in the digital realm is enough. People will tell you you need minus 6 dB, blah, 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 blah. If you were working on analog equipment, if you were going from tape, etc., you need that headroom to work. In the digital domain, if I've got a 16-bit file at, say, 44.1 kilohertz, if I take that 16-bit file down as much as 6 dB and then bump it back up within the realm of 16 dB, it's gonna still phase cancel itself. You're not losing enough in that overall dynamic range for it to be an issue. If you bounce it out at 24-bit, there's no chance. If you go extreme and do it as 32, I believe you can be something like minus 120 dB, normalize it, and still be able to phase cancel. So we don't need to worry about it too much in the digital domain. If I need that headroom at the final stage, I can put gain on, twist it down, or even pull the fader down. Oh, you did not say that. So we've checked that. We're going to bounce this track out and then we'll be in an empty session. When we bounce the track out, I'm going to do Command and B in this case. Most of the time I work in 16-bit 44.1. If your track is really dynamic, you've got a really quiet intro and then it goes into like a big drop where you're at like minus 0.5 like I am, you might want to use 24 dB. This track, that isn't really necessary. Whatever you decide to work in, depending on your music, how dynamic it is, stick with that so you're consistent, especially if you're working on an EP project or you're getting multiple things out. Having different bit depths means you can't pull a whole project together. I tend to just work at 16, 44.1. It's completely fine for me. You might want to work at 24, 48, whatever works for you. Just be consistent with it. So we're going to bounce this out at 16-bit 44.1. And with the power of editing magic, here we are, project loaded in as promised. The first thing that I would do, I'm going to click on the piece of audio and press Z. Boop. Here's one thing that I wanted to highlight straight away. I said you would be better bouncing it out and doing it this way. Look at that tail right there. that would have been an issue, wouldn't it, if we go and import our track and we try and play it out live. So the very first thing I'm looking to do, look at the intro, look at the end, top and tail it. I think that probably needs tailing for sure. So that's going to be like a reverb that echoes out at the end or something. And we're perceiving it as 0 about there, but it says there's actually still something going on. So what we can do is now roll it off to there, give it a little fade like so, and now happy days. Now it might not affect your set or you playing it out, but if you're sending it off to other people, you want to be respectful and not give them 30 seconds of silence. And there's the odd chance it could happen at the start and you've not really realised when you've mastered it or bounced it out or sent it over. This just negates those issues. Let's zoom in right at the start. I'm relatively good at leaving a tiny little bit of space, but it wasn't a finished track. So if we zoom right in, we are good, but we'll give it a tiny little fade and just make sure it starts without any clicks or pops. Lovely job. Right, so we've resolved one issue with the top and tail. The next thing we'll have a look at is we've got some like peaks over here, and we're just going to play over them, make sure we're not clipping. Like we checked before, our loudest point, we're at minus 0.5, minus 0.6 there, even though it looks like it's higher. Good overall, incentive of what's going on there. If your track's not as obvious as this little icon just up here, you can click it and it will compress the whole view. It's not done anything to the track, it's just giving you an idea of where there's peaks and tails. If you click and hold it, you can actually zoom it in yourself, so you can give yourself a better idea of what's going on. But overall loud music anyway, I can see it easily. Right, so next thing we need to have a look and make sure there's no major issues and resolve those. Now there is an analyzer in Logic Pro. I would recommend going picking up something like the Span Analyzer, which is free. It is better, but we're doing this totally in Logic Pro. So let's go into our metering and we've got our multimeter here. And let's play over the drop into the main bit of the track. So there's that big aggressive bass line. It's definitely part of the music, but it is sticking out a bit much here. And that might give us an issue when we want to bring the loudness up. We need to have a look at that headroom. So that just tells us right there, okay, big low end problem. Another thing I would say, headphones and speakers, check between both. For the sake of a video, I stay in my headphones. Otherwise I would be switching between the speakers using my little control down here as well as the headphones. If your little guy isn't showing up as well as this, by the way, it might be switched to 31 bands. It looks like that. And things aren't as obvious. Let's see if we get a key point. That's conveniently still showing us that low end. We'll switch it over to 63 bands, you just get way more detail. You get to see what's really going on in the low end too. It's probably safe to say here, anything below 30 Hertz we probably don't need. So we can get rid of that as well. Otherwise, everything else is looking pretty well balanced. So I'm now just going to move this over onto the stereo out, and that way anything I do on this channel is going to affect this, and I'll always be able to quickly reference back to it if needed. Oh, as well, I did the detection here in mono. Again, if your track's got like some hard panning stuff going on, you might want to do like the different sides. This is a completely mono-compatible track because of the aim of it. But yeah, absolutely worth having a look at those things as well. So we've got that set up, we're good to go there. Now, the fastest way to do things, really, you could use the mastering tool here in Logic. Just press this, it's going to analyze the track and it's going to give you a rough idea of what's going on. Now, I find this useful to get an idea of like those EQ curves. I said about that low end being way too much. This has made the decision that we should maybe pull that back a bit. So let's now play this back with a bit of context. Let's just A and B it for ourselves. So what that tells me is we're maybe going to benefit from a little bit of an EQ boost around 2K. We're probably going to benefit from taking a little bit of control over that low end so that we can then bump everything else up in volume. Would I do it this way right now? Probably not. And we'll disable that for the time being, but we've used it as a reference tool to give us an idea of where to head. Remember, we're trying to do this quickly rather than fiddle about and find everything. So we're using tools to give us an idea of where to head. So that's now disabled. Multimeter is still in there. So the first thing here, I'm going to pop an EQ, and we looked before, we probably don't need anything below 30. Let's have a look in the reference in here as well and just make sure that is the case. Yeah, so we can go to about 32 and just cut anything away. We can do that with an 18 dB slope quite comfortably. Then any extreme low rumble down there, not needed, we don't need it. Big rumbling bass is definitely part of this track, but I believe we can probably control it. And we could use a nice shelf here. Just take it down by like a dB.5. That gives us a dB.5 more headroom to get the loudness we need to be a competitively loud track. Now, in this instance, I don't think this track needs any compression necessarily, so I would actually put the EQ in now and give it a boost. Normally I would compress, then do any like positive EQ in afterwards, because if you do positive EQ and then compress, you're reducing the dynamic that you just lifted up to try and get like that louder sound. If you then reduced it down again, it's just counterproductive in my eyes. But I don't think this needs this. It is going to get limited to bring up the loudness. Let's try and find that spot to bring this up. It's right about there for me. So what do we end up? I end up at 1.7 dB there. And that just helps everything snap a bit more. I'll give it credit to this for telling me that probably needs a little something around there. High end seems alright. That'll do for me. Okay, on my main channel, I'm going to move the multimeter below the mastering because it's snuck in there. Now I've done that way simpler EQ. I'm going to take this auto EQ and just reduce that. Below my multimeter, I want LUFS meter, so that is the loudness meter in here. To be relatively competitive with going like out to a club, I mean -6 would be super aggressive. We can maybe get that. I'm going to put it to -9, so we're in that kind of ballpark. I want to see where we're at with that. To get the integrated, we're going to hit start. I need to play it through the track to get that idea of where it's going to be at. Loudness on here, I'm going to keep it on character as transparent, pump it up a touch. It does have a LUFS meter in here. I just trust this one a bit more. Maybe I'm foolish, but it's just the way I prefer things to be. Oh, and I'll just throw back a quick note on the EQ. If you've got a like disparity between your left and right, so it turns out you need to lift up the right a bit more than the left, for example, don't grab this EQ. You do have a linear band EQ in those instances. So we can go into EQ and grab the linear phase EQ here, look. You can switch it from stereo to say right only, and if you're only lifting up one side, you're going to cause yourself a phase discrepancy. If anything is then summed to mono at say a club, which absolutely does happen from experience, you would do that. You'd then have a linear phase on both of those curves there, only if you're doing left and right, otherwise it's really not necessary. I'm just going to let this run through the majority of the track. While we're doing this, we've got the spread on here and it's pushed it a little bit, so it's spread the track a little bit. Like I say, it was a mono-compatible track. As long as we don't cross over the 0 here, we're remaining 99% mono-compatible for the most part. So there's our correlation meter here. So that's a good thing to keep an eye on as well. If it's bouncing all over the place, you've got a phase issue. Like right there. I'm not too worried about it in this instance. What we would do, we would check it with the utility tool. So we've just seen there's that phase issue there. I'm not worried about it in that instance. I care about the drops, but we might just want to check it out. So we're going to go grab our gain tool. In here, we can switch to mono. I'm just going to play it back in mono. So we're like losing all of the reverb scope. Now, does that mean we need to take this away? We don't really get a benefit, but maybe dial it back a touch from where it was. It's not causing an issue. It's not like everything disappears. We get that big reverby ambience disappear. Playing back in a club, it's playing back in a venue that has that kind of feel about it anyways. If it had a vocal in going left and right and I was losing one side of the whole vocal, well, that'd be an issue. Cool, so we're not nearly loud enough on the loudness meter overall. We need to really crank that up. So we are going to do a bit of compression. I'm going to put the compressor before the EQ, but what I'll do is I'll tell it to ignore the low end as much as possible. Move you to that. I will leave this on Platinum Digital. I want it to be clean and transparent. Don't need it adding any special artifacts. This is the cleanest one that is in Logic. It's actually very good as a clean EQ. What I'm looking to do really is, if we look at the waveform here, I just want to like trim this lot off just to give us that couple of dB of headroom, and we're going to limit after the mastering limiter, which restricts us to -1 dB. We're going out to a high quality wave file here in this instance so we can play that game. So auto gain is going to go off. We don't want any distortion or any such thing. We definitely don't be coming off that much. 2 to 1's probably okay. Attack wise on this track and the transients I'm trying to capture, we'll probably have to go to about 5 milliseconds. But we can let it release over the likes of 40, maybe 20. See, the thing is, the low end, because the low end's way up there, yeah, is causing it to trigger a lot more. And we don't have, I don't believe anyway, no, we don't have a way to ignore the low end in this compressor. So what we'll have to do is we'll copy our EQ channel like that. So you just hold down Option and drag. I'm going to put one at the top here. Boop. So that one at the top, I'm going to disable this band. And it's just going to be our low end control. And then on the one afterwards, I'm going to disable these bands, and that's just going to be our 2K boost. Hello. I have to bring that down even quicker, like 2.5 milliseconds. I think we're going to have the release at like 20. Okay, it's a bit better. So we used this before for our like overall mastering loudness. I'm instead now going to use the adaptive limiter. It was a good ballpark to get us in the right space. So if we now go into our dynamics, we've got the adaptive limiter right here. We are going to take this down to -0.1. We're going to make sure true peak detection is on. And we're going to use this to really give us some level. Now, by doing this, we are missing out on that little bit of stereo width that this was giving us. So what we could do is bring everything over onto the master bus. I don't like to work that way, but it's the only way it will let you use this mastering chain. But we would bring the loudness back down to 0. We would bring our first EQ in after the gain, then our compressor over, and our EQ over. Then we've got the stereo width happening. This is like the only thing on here, and that tiny bit of EQ adjustment that it thinks is right. I think is doing a good job. And then we're going to put our adaptive limiter afterwards. Now this stops things going past -1 dB. However, because we've taken the loudness all the way down to 0, and we've got the adaptive limiter afterwards, we're going to be able to exceed that and push it right up. If you go into an MP3, it's a better way to go. For the example we're doing here, where you would want to do a quick master, this is the way to go. So now we're going to try and get our loudness out. We're going to loop over a nice loud bit of the track and try and get a ballpark, have the loudness meter up, so we've got an idea of our momentary, loft range. We can now see we're limiting a fair bit. I mean, we can really crank this. So our momentary and short-term lofts, absolutely cranking. Integrated's going to creep up a bit here, but that's not the true integrated value. You want to play it through the whole track. What I'm listening for here is making sure that it's not overly distorting, it doesn't feel too compressed for the genre. Everything translates, it's not falling apart, and we're getting plenty of loudness out of it. So we'll let this run through again and get an idea of the integrated loudness. Sweet, so we're right up there, -8 integrated lufts, super aggressive, nice and competitively loud for a club environment, so perfect, not distorting, not falling apart. Now I promise you at the start of the video, for anyone who might struggle and not be able to do this workflow, I'll show you some other techniques that will really help you out. So let's dive into those. So the first thing that I want to show you that can really help you out is, obviously we used this mastering tool here and it gave us an idea of an EQ curve that will really work. But something else you can do is bring another track in of your genre that you really like, which I'm going to use one of my own tracks because we're on YouTube and I have a copyright issue with using any other music. Use a track that you love from any other artist. You're not putting it out on YouTube, it doesn't matter, you're not going to get a copyright hit like I would showing you it on a video. Hope that makes sense. What we'll do, we'll grab one of my tracks. So here's the master of Do Better. Something I want to rewind all the way back to the start. I said keep consistent, 16-bit, 44.1, which means I can drop it into the session, no problem. So what you can do with this, firstly, it gives you exactly the indication of where you want to be with the overall loudness when you switch between the two. The problem we have currently is that this is now going to play through all of this channel, which is why I like to keep everything on these channel strips. So what I'm going to have to do is bring everything back over onto our master and just sacrifice the fact we're not going to have the extra width. So now we've got our master here. And we've got Do Better here. So I can switch between the two, and in this instance I'm listening for the overall loudness and brightness. Does everything sit right? That's for real a much darker track, so maybe we loop over a different section. Now because this is a vocals track versus an instrumental, I've got a nice instrumental part at the start for mixing in, so we use that as our reference. So what I know straight away now is I can maybe have a little bit more brightness in this track. So I could take that secondary EQ that lifted up 2K and I could give it a little bit of shine up here. A little bit of air, if you will. That makes quite a big difference actually. And that's literally just called referencing. You're just taking something you know already sounds good, using it as a position to listen to and go, oh, right, actually, I could benefit from such this, or I've done too much of this, or it's not loud enough by competitive standards. Switching between those, they seem all right. So that just gives us a very simple thing. Now, if you've got a track that's super similar to something else you're doing, ideally in the same key, but not necessarily, you can do this. I'm going to use this same example, even though they're not exactly the same, because I'm lazy. But what we can do is grab what's called the match EQ. And you'd want to have this go before the limiter. Conveniently, we've left a space right here. So we're going to EQ, we go into match EQ. We bring that guy in here, wonderful. So we have our current, our reference, and our EQ curve. Our current is the track we're on, so we can press learn, press play. You want to capture a nice long profile of the most important part of the track, be it the hook, the drop, whatever it is. When that's done, stop. Now for the reference, we can set ourselves up a bus. So for example, we could change our input here to bus 1 and change our output here to bus 1 and play it in and reference the track. But an even easier way, if we click just here, we can do generate reference spectrum from audio file. And there we go, makes all those adjustments for us. Now, the reason I said that it's important about key, in your low end, so you're like your last 50 hertz or from 60 really, you've only got like 12 different notes that can be played. And if you've got an F playing and it's giving a huge boost and your other tracks in E, they're quite far apart in terms of that overall spectrum. So what we want to do is we end up wanting to ignore this. So we do fade extremities, right? And we can drag that out like so, and we can have it ignore that low end if they're not in the same key. So just like that, you can see it's now ignoring all of that low end information there. And then we've got the smoothing amount. I like this smooth sort of like that, rather than these really detailed, intricate adjustments. Nice and smooth EQ, I think, sounds a lot better. And then the overall amount it's adjusting, do you actually want to cut it and invert it? Probably not. So we'll just give it a little boost like that. And that's just going to help us match those curves a little bit more specifically to a track. And those are just a couple of quick bonus tips for anyone who's struggling to get those matches, find those EQ points and get it sounding right. Quick ways to find it right there for you. Now at the start of the video, I promised anyone who wanted to listen through to the whole finished master. Well, here it is. Thank you very much for watching. It's been a pleasure having you here and I look forward to seeing you in new videos. Take care.